Hi, my name's John, and I'm going to see whether or not I can service this Waltham Grade 210 pocket watch. It's from about 1909. It's a size 12S, which means it's supposed to be 39.79 millimeters. It's about 1.57 inches in diameter, and I have checked with calipers. It is actually bang on the money. So I've used the blower briefly, and we can see the balance wheel is rocking back and forward fairly freely, although it doesn't keep going. That's understandable. There is some wind left in this, and it does occasionally start running, but it's not consistent. So hopefully after we strip it down and lubricate it, put it back together, maybe it will run a bit better. I guess we'll find out, right? So now I'm just setting the hands to 12 o'clock. They're a little bit easier to remove if they're both pointing in the same direction. You can get your levers in a bit easier. I'm going to put some plastic on there just so that when I stick in my high quality hand removal levers, they won't damage the screen. And as you'll see in a second, my high quality levers are 2 screwdrivers. So it's even more important to put some plastic in there. Maybe at some point I should actually buy some proper hand levers. What do you think? So we've got the hour and minute hand off, and I got some even smaller screwdrivers to remove the seconds hand, and that's come off as well. And we'll grab those with some little Delrin tweezers, which are good for parts like hands. They're really not precise enough to work with a lot of the smaller components of a watch, but they are nice for the hands and they don't damage them, and it's all good stuff. So next I stare at the watch for a bit and try and figure out how to remove the face. I conclude there are 3 screws around the outside, which curiously don't point directly towards the center of the watch. They're actually off at a slight angle, which is interesting when you're trying to line a screwdriver up, right? Anyway, there are 3 of those. They don't want to come out unless you bang them out. They don't come out far enough for you to actually grab them with tweezers. But that's okay, we'll get the 3 out eventually, and then hopefully we can remove the face and get on with the rest of the watch. The face itself is actually in really nice condition. I'm really pleased with how this came out. This was an extremely cheap buy on eBay. It did not come with a case, and that's why we're working on the bare movement today. It's an open face movement, so it's intended to have the glass front rather than being in like a hunter case or something. That'll also play in when we start to play around with the winding stem, because there is not a winding stem, primarily because in American pocket watches, typically the winding stem seems to actually be part of the case itself, and there's just a small bit that pokes out into the winding stem in the watch. I did not expect, by the way, to see green on the back of the face there. That was quite unpleasant, but I guess no one sees it, so it really doesn't matter. So we'll start off. There's a dial washer on there, which is supposed to help keep the hour wheel in place by letting the dial push down on it and stop it falling off the pinion. This one's weird, it's very thin copper, and I'd like to replace it sometime, but for now we'll be okay. We'll get the hour wheel off, and then we're going to flip it. And you'll notice that I forgot to remove the cannon pinion, and that's not desperate, but it will come back to bite me later, and I'll take it off at that point. The watch has decided to kick off at this point. It obviously likes what we're doing, and you can see the balance wheel spinning around. I mentioned earlier that the winding stem tends to be part of the pocket watch case. What that means is when you're servicing it, you stick something in the winding stem, and by default it's not going to actually wind the watch. So there's a little service lever that I just pulled out with a screwdriver there, and when that's out, and I'm using my screwdriver as a lever, when that's out it now engages the winding mechanism. So I'm pulling back on the click spring so that I can, as best I can, gently let down the power that remains in the mainspring, so that hopefully the watch doesn't explode and fire parts everywhere at me as I take things apart. And it looks like the balance wheel's stopping moving there. You can just see it under my finger. So, yep, it's stopped now. That's a good sign that there's nothing left in the mainspring. Hooray! So we'll get the balance out first. I believe when it's all in one piece it's called the balance complete, but you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. It's pretty delicate. We'll see in a minute. It's got a... there we go. Delicate by throwing it away everywhere. Throwing it around the place. It's got a very delicate hairspring on there, a coiled spring that allows that wheel to spring back and forward. So we try and protect that. At least keep it as safe as we can. I don't want to have to get into repairing a balance spring or a balance wheel. That doesn't sound like fun to me. Especially when you're as clumsy as I am. Why I try doing watch service, I really don't know. So anyway, there it comes out, and we'll place it down on the surface for the moment. I'm going to line the parts up as I take them out, and I'll try and position it so that the balance wheel is sitting back on the pinion on top of the balance cock. And there you go, there's a picture of the balance wheel with the hairspring on it from this watch. So next up we're going to try and take out the click. That's effectively the ratchet that stops the mainspring unwinding when you put a wind into it. Stops it going backwards. It's also what gives you the click when you wind up a watch. The little sound as you wind it up is this little thing. This one's actually really quiet. It's feels very grown up. And look at me throwing screws around. I'm worried about them exploding from the watch, and I can't even put them down on the surface without them pinging. So we'll take this out. I'm being careful because I haven't figured out yet how this is sprung. And if there's a separate spring, so I'm just using a bit of pegwood to try and keep control over it. But as I took it out, I could see it looked like it was coming out as one piece. I'm just taking a look there to see whether or not the spring is separate, but actually it's a very clever piece of folded metal. It appears to be a spring and a click all in one. So that's rather clever, rather handy. So we'll dump that down next to its screw. And next up we'll undo the crown wheel, undo the screw on the crown wheel. And then we'll also take out the screw on the ratchet. And I will do my best on my way through to use the right names for things. I will make a mistake somewhere, so please be tolerant. But you're also welcome to correct me in the comments and give me the right names, and I will do my best to get it right in the future. One thing I've discovered is it's very hard to put your hands in a position where you can see everything from a camera. I need to work on that. I'm just making a note to myself that one of those screws is shorter than the other one. So there's the ratchet wheel. It's real simple. Has a square hole in the middle so that it can grab onto the barrel arbor, which is how we're going to get the turns down into the barrel. And then the ratchet wheel comes off. That's actually got an inner wheel, and in order to engage with the winding mechanism, it has downward facing gears on it as well, which you can just see at the bottom there. You can see it has like an inner set of teeth that actually go vertically. So now we'll start taking off this bridge, which is covering both the barrel and the center wheel and the third wheel. So let's take these screws out and put them neatly down. I normally put everything in the blue tray, but I figured it might be nice to see all the screws next to the thing they came from. And off comes the bridge. Comes off nice and cleanly. I'm actually surprised the watch is not in terrible shape. It's not really dirty, it's certainly not rusty. It's in pretty good condition. And this is the point at which I realised I was an idiot and didn't take off the cannon pinion, because in order to remove the centre wheel, I'm going to have to do that. Now, I don't have one of those nice expensive cannon pinion remover tools, but I do have, I believe it's called a Presto tool, which I seem to manage to make work one way or another. I always feel like I'm doing it wrong, but it does eventually come out. But I'd love to get one of those cannon pinion tools. They just seem to make it so quick and easy. Come on, there we go. Alright, one cannon pinion. Hooray! And the barrel fell out. There you go. This is why you do the cannon pinion first. Now you're not working with stuff upside down. I'm amazed the centre wheel didn't plummet out. So it's a little bit sticky though. I had to remove it. You'll see in a second I have to remove it by going underneath it because it just wasn't grabbing from the top. So I needed a little bit of leverage, trying not to damage it. But that centre wheel, as you can see, has quite a long pin on it, and that goes all the way through the watch. And that's what the hands are ultimately connected to on the other side, albeit with the cannon pinion and the hour wheel hugging around it. That's how the power is transferred effectively, or how the watch position is transferred from the back to the front. So it's kind of important. So I'm removing the next bridge, which technically is holding in the fourth wheel and the escape wheel, but you can probably see that the third wheel sticks under there slightly, so rather than try and pull out the third wheel, I've left it in there until I've got this bridge off. This was happening to me a lot today. This is an experience thing. You see the screws that I had undone until they were bumping along the top of their threads, and yet still you come in with the tweezers and they don't come out. I'm sure there's a trick to that, and I'll learn it as I go along, but for now, every now and again, I have to go back and try and get the screw out a second time. Look, I just undid that one. Come on. Try it again. What do you mean, no? That's frustrating. Fine, we'll just take the whole thing out. And of course, it was loose. Who knew? So there's the bridge. And now we have the rest of the train of gears exposed, so I can get access to the third wheel, fourth wheel, and escape wheel, and get those out. Typically, as you go down that train of wheels, they're getting smaller. The third and fourth wheels are often very similar. As you can see there, in the very foreground, you would have the barrel, which is effectively the first wheel, and you can see centre wheel, third, fourth, and then the escape wheel on the end of that train is the smallest, and actually can go surprisingly fast when you don't have anything stopping it doing that. Like, for example, a pallet fork. And what do you know, I'm removing the pallet fork bridge at the moment. 2 annoyingly small screws. Not really annoyingly. But I'll try and hold it down so I don't manage to throw the whole thing off whack and damage anything if I can. Okay, so let's go grab that bridge. Oh, I'm going to be brave and try and grab the screws, and again, they do not want to come out. There's one. And again, I'll try and lay them out so that the screws from that stay with the part they came from. I'm not sure if I'm really doing that for me or as something to watch, for the video, but either way, it's actually a decent way of organising things, particularly while you're trying to understand how everything goes back together. One of the hardest things that you find is which screws go where. Most other things you can figure out the place for, you can remember where they came from. But when you have multiple tiny screws that all look very similar, it's kind of I think a developed skill to figure out where they all go. Now my challenge on this video is to put the watch back together without referring back to my own video, because I want to see what I can deduce from first principles. And I did, in the end, spoiler alert, succeed in doing so, but not without some missteps and some realizations that I'd made some rookie mistakes along the way. And for your sanity, I've edited a bunch of those out later on in the video simply because they took me a while to install, uninstall, install, uninstall, install as I fiddle around before finally realizing. But it's a great way to learn. There you go, here's a pallet fork. You can see the jewels on those. The 2 jewels there. It looks like it's in decent shape, best I can tell. So now I'm removing a cover. It's part of the winding mechanism. Underneath this is the yoke and the yoke spring, and the setting lever. So I've got to be somewhat careful with these because that spring can and will go flying, and I've made the mistake before of being cautious right up until the point of touching the spring and then forgetting to be cautious. So there's a little circular spring, looks kind of like a pig's nose ring. So hopefully you can just see that there. So I'm going to use some pegwood to hold it down so that hopefully I can separate these. Alright, we got it. I can't hold it, but we've got it. So there's my little spring. Don't worry, I'll lose it when I try and put it all back together. Alrighty. We can't quite take out all this mechanism yet because some of it is actually, I've just taken out that service lever that I set up earlier so that I could wind it. So yes, you can't take out the winding mechanism quite yet. So on the other side, oh yeah, there comes a wheel from the other side. On the other side, there is a disc that's screwed down with a gear underneath it that then goes all the way through to the end stop on this side. It's kind of hard to describe. But basically that is what is holding in the gears for the winding mechanism. So if I take this off, from the top down there's a screw, and then there's a little disc with one end that's been flattened off. My screwdriver's not good enough. This is the problem with cheap screwdrivers, is if you don't have sufficiently hardened tips, when you deal with a hard screw they twist. Or sometimes it's just simply a case that your screwdrivers do not fit that particular screw. So having an Arkansas grinding stone, sharpening stone, or something similar to that is kind of handy. I'm just able to sharpen the tip so that it fits that screw now. So we'll try it, and hopefully this time it'll actually grab the screw head. I'm always worried about tearing the screw heads and putting too much pressure on. But it's an interesting challenge figuring out which is the right screwdriver. It's not necessarily always the smallest one, even on tiny screws. You've really got to find the one that fits the screw head the best. So out comes that little disc, and underneath that, the screw. Yeah, got to work on my tweezer skills. I'll just pick everything up with Rodico from now on. So now I should be able to get at the mechanism. You can see there, it's all nice. Once that disc is out, it all falls apart. On the left hand side, there's the cog is over there, little gear. That's the end stop coming off there. And then we've got a nice gear, square head. That's my gear. Little spacer, good. Well, this looks like, do we have everything off? I'm going to check both sides, see what I've missed, if anything. Yep. This movement only has something like 7 joules in it. So this is not going to be the world's smoothest running watch. But actually, the metal pinion holes, I've been kind of surprised at how well they work when you look at the old dollar watch pocket watches that keep surprisingly good time, given that inside there are 0 joules. They're basically junk. Real pressed metal. Alright, so we're going to take the barrel apart so we can get the mainspring out. The lid on this barrel doesn't latch in and click into place like it might on many other watches. What it does have that's interesting though is that the barrel arbor, which is what actually hooks onto the spring, there's a hole in the end of the spring and that hooks onto a little bit of metal that sticks out. That hook is actually attached to the lid of the barrel. And then we have a post that goes through the lid of the barrel and is basically able to connect to the ratchet wheel and the winding mechanism. So it's really a 2-part barrel arbor. So we'll get the mainspring out and I'll try not to wear it. And to my credit, I did not let the mainspring fly away. However, in the process of trying to make sure it was visible for the camera, I lost touch of where we were. I had a great grip on the mainspring and slightly less. Yep, there goes the back half of the barrel. Oops. Thankfully, no damage done. Found it. There we go. So, all is good. Alright, so let's take a look around. This is the entire watch disassembled. And we'll do the slow-mo glamour shot just to see all the pieces. And they're really in surprisingly good condition. We're going to clean them in a second, but it's, I'm pretty impressed. Ain't she pretty? Alright, let's grab everything. I don't have a very sophisticated cleaning setup, but I do have a little ultrasonic cleaner. So we're going to get all the tiny things into a little screw holder, little brass screw holder. They're pretty cheap. They seem to do the job. Screw that up so nothing gets lost, and then we'll put everything else in the basket. The one thing I meant to do, and I didn't because I'm an idiot, was I meant to put the balance back onto the body to try and protect it a little bit, and I totally didn't. But that's showbiz. So let's get it off into the ultrasound. It'll get washed, and then I'll rinse it a couple of times, and then I'll dry it. And here it is. Everything's clean and shiny. Shinier even, dare I say, than it was when I started. So now reassembly begins. Ugh. As I said earlier, there are parts of the reassembly that I have cut out or edited together to spare you going through me staring at the watch parts going, what am I doing wrong? But for this part, we'll get the winding mechanism put back together. So I'm basically pre-assembling the part that the winding stem will go into from the case, including there's a small pin that goes in the end. And then I'm going to put that, you see I've put the end stop in there. I'm just going to push the pin in and put that whole mechanism in place. I then have to flip back to the other side. If you remember that, there was a disc and a gear that was screwed in that held everything in. And since the mechanism doesn't like staying in place without being screwed in, I'm just using some Rodico here to try and hold the winding mechanism in the right place so that I can put everything in from the other side, add that screw, and once the screw's in, everything should hold in. Famous last words, of course. Now what you're seeing here is the magic of editing, because you'll notice I did not put in that little gear that I mentioned earlier. Rest assured that off camera I did go back and add the gear in that I missed at this point. So I apologize for not having it on camera, but it did get fixed and it does now wind. I figured you probably wouldn't want to sit through seeing me take things apart again and cry. Don't ever want to see me cry. Come on, you can do this. This is one of these screws that just did not want to fall into the hole. Alright, I think we may finally have it. Remove the Rodico! Yeah. Alright. We'll finish tightening that up now, just make sure it's done. Oh, that was careless. I'm just trying to rotate the disc on the back. I mentioned it had one flat edge to it. I'm just trying to make sure it's rotated so that flat edge is pointing in the correct direction, which is towards the outside of the case. I'm sure it makes all the difference. I'm going to slide this gear in. I don't know if it'll stay in, but it feels like while I'm here and it sits slightly underneath that the disc I just put on, little washer, it makes sense to put it on. I'll probably regret that later, but we'll see. Yeah, gotta loosen that so I can get the gear in properly. See, we learn lessons as we do this. It has been said that learning how to repair watches is a great way to learn patience, and you really have to have patience. You have to be willing to spend 20 minutes putting something together and getting it right, getting it finally working, and then realizing that something else you need to put in was supposed to have gone in first, and you're an idiot. Okay, so now we're going to try and get the setting lever and the yoke in there. These were fiddly, and I edited out a lot of frustration and cursing. Trying to get these two in place and get the spring on is one of those exercises in patience that I was just talking about. You definitely have to be patient, keep working at it, and if you get impatient, that's when springs tend to start flying around your workspace. I have a Berber carpet in this room, so if anything small and that could hook onto a carpet fiber, if anything, any of that stuff hits the floor, it's pretty much gone. So apparently I'm being very thoughtful and adding some grease. I have edited out a lot of the grease and other lubricant addition just to keep the length of the video reasonable, but I did try and lubricate as I went. So I'm just putting that on the sliding pinion, which basically, depending on where that's positioned, which is driven by where you have the winding stem effectively, that determines whether or not it's going to be winding the watch when you turn the stem, or if it's going to be controlling the time by setting the hands. So that goes back and forward, and it's just metal on metal. So we'll put a bit of grease on there. So come on, let's get that yoke on. Woo. I assume it's a yoke. Maybe it's not a yoke. What do I know? Let's put that little curly piece of metal on, in the place where it should go. Okay, so now I'm trying to get that little curved spring around them. That basically ensures that the mechanism clicks into place and clicks out of place as you slide back and forward. This is all called the keyless works. So the idea you can not have to use a key as you used to with old pocket watches. They all used to come with a separate key. You'd open the back and stick the key in. So the idea that you could use the crown and a winding stem in order to actually wind the watch as well as set the hands on the watch must have been a great relief to everyone. And then this became imaginatively termed the keyless works. So basically it's the bit that's involved in both getting power in to wind up the mechanism as well as, alternatively, depending on where the winding stem is, being able to set the hands. And obviously on modern watches that might also mean it can set the date, or it can have other functions depending on what complications your watch might have. This one's pretty simple. It does two things: winding or hand setting. And it only sets the hour and minute hands. This doesn't stop the seconds moving when you're setting the time. That requires an additional bit of gearing called the hack, or known as the hack at least, which will basically freeze the seconds hand. So if you want to set a watch precisely, you want to be able to set the seconds hand to, let's say, 0 seconds, pointing at 12, and then set the time, and then, on the third beep, get the time going again. You can't do that on these old pocket watches. They don't have hacks in them. So wherever the second hand is, that's just where it is. If you're looking for precision timekeeping, this may not be for you. Alright, so I'm just checking that the pin inside the winding stem there was actually moving the sliding pinion, and it was. So now I'm going to slap in the escape wheel, throw it everywhere. That's a spirit. Alright, we're going to try and get that in its hole. I'm trying to get better at this, but boy, it takes practice. And just think, this is a pocket watch, so this is on the larger size of things. You've seen, I'm sure you've all seen how small some of the wristwatches can go. So really this is luxury. I should enjoy the space and the magnification. Alright, I got the fourth wheel on as well, looks like, and we're going to get that third of the fourth wheel and escape wheel bridge back on. This took me a few goes because for a while things were actually spinning okay. When I looked more closely, I realised that one of the pinions was not into its hole properly, despite what it looked like. And so I spent a little bit of time, which I've spared you, making sure that they really were running freely. And it's not worth rushing these. It's certainly not worth forcing them. If you force them, the pinions on these are so tiny. They're so thin. If you push down the bridge and just say, well, I'm going to make it fit, you just end up bending or snapping those pinions. Once you've done that, the wheels are not going to run freely. So you've got to take your time and make sure that you're not screwing down a bridge when things are not in their places properly. I've actually found it's harder to see on watches that do not have jewels for their bearings. I find the jewel bearings, easier to see when the pinion's gone in, because you can see it inside the jewel. I found it a little bit harder on some of these metal holes to figure out what's going on. I bet you don't see other channels do this. And I'm trying to get in and see why this is not quite lining up. And the answer on this watch was that 9 out of 10 times it was the escape wheel which came out of its lower hole very easily. Oh hey, who's that handsome fella? Yeah, I'm definitely using some magnification for some of this. So, looks like I've got the bridge in place. We're going to throw the screws everywhere because I can't handle tweezers. Goodness me, it's kind of sad, isn't it? I'm holding the bridge down. It's at this point, when you've got a bridge in place, oh goodness me, at this point if you've got a bridge in place, it's worth holding down, whether it's with a finger or a piece of pegboard or something. If you so much as tilt the watch holder, or if you knock one of the legs that stick out on it, you know, the bar sticking out sideways, you'll just knock it out of place, and then all of the effort you put into getting it working properly is now wasted and you have to start again. So once it's in, hold it in until you can screw it in. Alright, just done a quick test with a blower. There you can see things are spinning very freely there, which is great news. So I'll just make sure everything is fully tightened down, and then we can get on with the rest. Now from here on in there is definitely some editing that's taken place on my part, and the reason I mention that is when we took this apart, I did mention that the third wheel was kind of half under that bridge and half not, and you notice I've not put the third wheel in yet, so I am going to squeeze it in here. It was tricky to get that third wheel in place under the bridge, get the barrel in, get the center wheel in place, and then get the next bridge over all of those. If you remember, I had a bridge that covers the barrel, the center, and the third wheel. It was definitely fiddly. It was not a fun experience. It took quite a while to get things in properly. We did, of course, eventually succeed, but all the while, you know, you're concerned about damaging the parts of the watch. That's the last thing you want to do. Alright, looks like I got that one in place, and now with any luck I can just slide the center wheel on, get things as upright as I can, and then we'll see if we can get that bridge on top. Now something else that I had to do, I realized, I mentioned earlier that while there is an arbor on the inside of the barrel lid, that there was also a stem that went through that and connected to the keyless works. Well, naturally you can imagine that you can see the hole on top of the barrel there. This isn't good, so I'm now putting the bridge back on, but I'm actually missing a piece that's supposed to stick up through that and engage with the ratchet. So that's going to be a problem, which I will magically fix with the joy of editing later. But again, that piece was cunningly missed. And it's good, again, it's a good learning experience to screw things up and have to go back and fix them. Because what I want really to do is to spend my day repeatedly putting the same bridge on and getting the same frustration. But that's looking good. The center wheel's turning and everything is whizzing around, getting faster as it goes down the train of gears, so Happy with that. So we're going to try and put some screws on. Well, there's me desperately trying to hold down that bridge because after a lot of pain I went through taking it off and on and off and on, the last thing I want to do is to finally get it in place and everything working nicely and then blow it by letting it rock and rock a pinion out of one of those holes. Two for three. I think we're safe. Ooh, screwdriver technique. Or lack of. Mastery of all he surveys. Unfortunately, he's short-sighted. Alright, let's just check again. Yay, we can see things are spinning very freely. So this is a good sign, at least this far. I'm trying to test as I put the train of gears together to try and make sure that I haven't totally messed things up. You know, beyond missing barrel stems and things. But, you know, minor point. You can almost hear the brain going, what do I do next? I'm going to oil something. That's what I'm going to do. Just putting that under the crown wheel because it's going to rotate around metal on metal. And so I'm just giving a little HP 1300 on that. Here's some more magic. This fits perfectly the wrong way round. That disc that I just put in there, the inner ring, should go second. It should not go on first. Ask me how I know. Again, you may be rest assured that I went back and fixed that. I never said I was an expert, but I'm trying to learn, and this is how we learn, by making fools of ourselves. So all of this culminates in me trying to put a wind into the watch, so that I can then I can have the pallet fork in, and I can see whether or not the pallet fork moves. And as you can imagine, it doesn't go very well because that gear is put together slightly wrong, and I don't have that. I don't have that stem that goes through the barrel. So my ratchet gear is doing absolutely nothing, although it will sound wonderful when the click's in place. See, I should have guessed from the fact that the crown wheel is kind of, looked like it was rocking there slightly. But no, have screwdriver. We'll do up screws. Brrr. Come on now, it's a straight line. How hard is it? Get that screwdriver blade in there. Come on, we know what to do next. Yeah. Let's put that ratchet wheel on. It all fits in pretty tightly because obviously it's meshing with the crown wheel as well. So we just need to make sure it goes down and the teeth are in position. Mesh, mesh. There we go. I feel your frustration. Trust me, I do. After all that, you take it off. There's something not right here. That's right, there is something not right. I wonder how long it will take him to notice. As a good start, you see, knocking the screwdriver out of the hole. So really, it's absolutely perfect at this point, except that it isn't. Yes, so the barrel, turning the barrel does turn all the gears, so we do have the train of gears in place. And so stupidly I'm going to install the pallet fork, do my best to. This took a while as well, and again once I've stopped throwing the pallet fork around the place, put it back on. Talk about sensitive parts of the watch, we'll just throw them around, who cares. Yes, this did take a while to get the pallet fork bridge to go in. Yeah, put it in upside down. Good plan, John. There we go, fix that. And it really shouldn't have done, but the pallet fork, like the escape wheel, it likes to leap out of its mounting. So, and it's small, and I can't use tweezers. I hate watching myself use tweezers. It's terrible. It always feels better when you're doing it yourself. And then you watch, you know, like good people, and you realise that their mastery of the tweezer far exceeds your own. Cack-handed is my current level. I'm trying to teach myself that fast movements around a watch mechanism do not end in success and happiness. It's very tempting once something goes in place to, you know, remove your hands quickly, or, you know, it's just like, haha, it's done, take your hands away. And that's usually when you knock the movement holder and it undoes all the work you did and we're about to screw in. I see the attraction of the watch-specific circular movement holders rather than these one-size-fits-everything. I have knocked those bars that stick out, I have knocked those so many times and disrupted the watch I was working on. It's incredibly frustrating. On the other hand, also much better value for money. So I'm just testing that the pallet fork is actually lined up properly and is able to move. It is. And then off camera, I go off and put some wind in, and that's when I discover all the problems that I've had and I go fix them. And now we're back where I was, which is the pallet fork's back in, but now this time I do actually have some wind in there because I put the stem into the barrel and I put in the crown wheel the correct way around, and so now we're going to try and fit the balance, and fingers crossed, and we'll see if it actually comes to life or not. Let's see if I can get the balance cock in there properly. Hey, look at that! Happy times! It springs to life. Now, I will say the mainspring, I'm not very happy with the mainspring. It looks pretty worn. It's the hook onto the arbor looks pretty trashed. So at some point I may do something where I try and replace the mainspring and see what difference that makes to the watch's performance. But meanwhile, it's what I've got right now. And look at that thing go. I didn't destroy it. So we're almost back together now. Let's have a quick look at the the watch face, as I said, it's in really quite good condition, especially when you think that it's 113 years old. It is just, I'm just using some water and some makeup buds just to give it a clean. At first it actually looked cleaner than it was, and then as I started looking at it from certain angles, I could see that there were grease marks on there that needed a little bit more attention. But nothing, no real discoloration, it was just annoyance. Let's try and dry it off a little bit and see how we're doing. Yeah, that's where I start seeing some of the other little pieces that need doing. But pleasantly, the printing's not coming off. So I'm able to be reasonably aggressive with this, much more than I probably should be able to get away with. On this face you probably saw that the seconds dial is actually a cutout, and then they solder in a separate dial for the seconds hands. Which is kind of interesting. So it's sunk in slightly, and that's good because that allows you to have the hand slightly lower, which means that the hour and the minute hand can pass over the top much more easily. Gives you a bit more space to work with. So I bet you can really tell the difference with the dial cleaned on camera. Now I did get confused for a second here. I've put on the dial washer, and you notice I've set the stem up at 3 o'clock, and that's because the last watch I was working on was a double hunter. However, I corrected that mistake, put it back in at 12, and amazingly at that point the watch feet go into the base properly. And now we'll put the case screws, the dial screws back in and do those up. Worried for a second I'd lost it. The dial screws on this actually go inside the case quite nicely. They're sunk in slightly. That one dropped in so easily I actually thought I'd dropped it in the wrong hole, and it had disappeared inside the case, which would have been just inside the movement, would have been perfect. But no, it was in the screw hole, it was just hiding. Even with good light it can be very hard to tell with these screws. Once they get inside in the dark, they're gone. Pick number 2, my lord. But I'm on a roll. Nothing's going to stop me now. He cursed himself. That's right. Don't stick it in the stem hole. That would be a bad idea. So close. You got this, buddy. Something missing. What could it be? Yep, no, that side of the watch is definitely there. Yeah, I couldn't find the right size stem on my multi-stem thing. Antique. So, back to the screwdriver. Modern man's winding stem. Multi-purpose, you know. You can also drive screws. So now we know it's going, we can take a look at the hands. I'm really not going to do anything with the hands. They're blued steel, they're quite nice. But I didn't think they needed cleaning, so we're just going to put them on. Stupid idea. Don't use a screwdriver near the face. What are you doing? Yeah, we'll do. Or just push that on. Now let's get the minute hand on as well. Now bear in mind this movement has been out of the case for a while, clearly. So it's been stored and shipped without any protection for the hands. So heaven knows what shape they're really going to be in. I could have found out before, I suppose, but it's much more fun throwing the hands around and then finding out. So we'll try and line them up. I like lining up on 12, but as has been pointed out, especially when you don't have a date to worry about, you can line up on any hour. All right, we're on. Oh, little tweak. All right, now we're on. Okay, and very important now, we will go and validate that, well, we'll go off screen for a bit. We'll grab my magical screwdriver, and because the service lever's in, I'm going to push that in, there you go. Now we'll move into time setting mode, and we'll go and check the hands turn. And there we go, I'll try and show you what I'm doing. Let's turn those hands. Yeah, traffic jam. Okay. So we're going to need to fix that. It looks like the hour hand is a little bit bent. It's bent up very slightly. So unfortunately, having put the hands on, guess what's going to happen? Remember that discussion about patience? Yeah. Off they come. I'm still trying to decide the relative merits of having the hands sitting over the plastic versus under. I may start doing under, because that way if they ping up, they've got nowhere to go other than in the plastic. It's an opinion thing. Alright, so I'm going to use my little gel mat there. Just to very gently tease it into a slightly more downward shape. I'm sure there are more professional ways to do this, but this works for me. And having previously snapped a hand off at the stem, snapped it off at its core before, I'm always a little bit twitchy about being too brutal with hands. So that worked out to be a fairly gentle way to flatten it out for me. And so now we'll do it again. It's one hand. Come back. No. Cack-handed, I keep saying. It'll come with time. I know it will. It just makes me look terrible. Which is fair enough. I'm new to this. What do you expect? Perfection? Get out of here. No, don't come back. Come back. Alright, let's try again with my magically repaired hand. Okay, will it do it? Yes! We have a winner. And we've just got to hope now that when I put the second hands on, that stays out of the way of the other two. Let's find that little second hand. Where are you? So tiny. You can do it. I don't know why I'm trying to put it at 12. It doesn't matter. It just felt right. There we go. Makes no difference. Come on you get. Alright, are we gonna... Yeah, okay, we're not catching on him, just making sure that it's not. Yep, I think we can get all the way around. It really is worth going all the way around all 12 hours. Don't cut it short. So there it is. I've successfully not destroyed a Waltham Grade 210 movement from about 1909, and it appears to be ticking. And maybe I'll go back and fiddle with that mainspring. But there you go. We're done. I'm happy.